Wait, don't sign that paper! The voice didn't come from the powerful executives seated around the polished oak table in the grand ballroom of the Imperial Hotel in New York, but from a young woman carrying a tray of champagne glasses. Her name was Elena Carter, and at 25, she was a single mom, invisible to most people in that glittering room, working 3 exhausting jobs to feed her 4-year-old son. The chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars. The marble floor reflected golden light, and everywhere men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns laughed as though the world belonged only to them. In the center of the table lay the Knight's Trophy, a contract for an $8 billion merger that was about to make headlines across Wall Street. At the head sat billionaire tycoon Dominic Hale, the host of the evening, a man celebrated in business magazines as untouchable. To him and to everyone else at that table, Elena was just a server. Elena was just a server, someone they didn't notice until their glasses were empty. But tonight, she had seen something no one else had, and it was enough to freeze her blood. When her father, Professor Daniel Carter, had still been alive, he used to explain financial traps to her when she was just a teenager. He had been a brilliant economist before his death, and his voice still lived inside her memory. Elena, some clauses look harmless, but they can destroy an empire in 30 days. And there it was, right in front of her in bold print, a reverse transfer clause hidden deep in the merger. She leaned forward, her voice calm but urgent. "Mr. Hale, don't sign that." For a second, silence blanketed the room, but then came the mocking laughter. A silver-haired shareholder smirked. "Did the waitress just give us legal advice?" Another woman in a blood-red gown leaned to her neighbor and whispered loudly, "She probably can't even read properly. How embarrassing." A man with a gold watch chuckled. "She must think she's in a movie scene." The laughter stung like knives, but Elena didn't flinch. She had been underestimated her whole life. In school, in every job she ever held, in every moment she had been treated as invisible. Her grandmother's words echoed in her heart. "Let them think you're small, Elena. One day you'll show them how wrong they were." That day had come. The hotel manager rushed toward her, whispering in panic, "Stop this immediately! Do you want to lose your job?" But Elena's eyes stayed locked on Dominic Hale. Calmly, she pointed to a specific line and repeated, "Transfer of all parent company assets within 30 days. This time, the laughter stopped. One bespectacled shareholder grabbed the papers, scanned the page, and her face drained of color. "She's right," she muttered in disbelief. The room stiffened like stone. Dominic's lead lawyer, Richard Cole, scoffed, his arrogance filling the air. "Impossible. A waitress cannot possibly interpret a document that took me and my team weeks to finalize." The laughter returned, sharper, nastier. "She didn't even finish high school. Why are we listening to her?" But Dominic's eyes lingered on Elena. Something about her unwavering calm, the way her words cut directly to the truth, made him hesitate. For the first time in the evening, the billionaire wasn't smiling. And Elena wasn't done. As she moved quietly around the table, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She slipped it out discreetly and messaged her father's old colleague, Dr. Adrian Blake, a legendary economist she still trusted. "Reverse transfer clause spotted in merger contract. Need confirmation. Urgent." His reply came in minutes. "Elena, those are rare and dangerous. Do not let them sign. I'm on my way." Her pulse raced, because while everyone in the room thought she had stumbled onto a lucky guess, she had already spotted a second hidden clause, something even worse. Flipping through the fine print, her eyes froze on page 64, line 12. It wasn't just the company's assets at risk. The clause tied in Dominic Hale's personal wealth and debts, binding him directly into the trap. In other words, if he signed, He wouldn't just lose his empire. He could lose everything he owned, from his mansions to his bank accounts. Elena leaned in again, her voice firm but low enough that only he could hear. Page 64, line 12. They're not only buying your company, Mr. Hale. They're coming for you. Dominic's eyes snapped wide as he flipped the pages. His jaw tightened, his hand curled into a fist, and for the first time that evening, the billionaire who had built his reputation on confidence and control looked shaken. Then, with a commanding voice that silenced the room, he raised his hand and said, "Enough. Bring in my personal lawyer, now." His lawyers erupted in protest. Shareholders exchanged nervous glances. Whispers swirled. "Imagine if this leaks. Dominic Hale almost got tricked by his own deal, and a waitress stopped him." The cruelty and mockery still lingered, but Elena stood firm. She was no longer just pouring champagne. She was holding the fate of billions in her hands. At precisely 10:20 p.m., the grand doors of the ballroom opened and Dr. Adrian Blake entered with a heavy briefcase in hand. The room gasped. His reputation was legendary, and his presence alone carried weight that silenced even the most arrogant voices. "Elena Carter," he said clearly, acknowledging her before anyone else. "The documents you sent me confirm everything. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're looking at is not a merger. It is the most elaborate fraudulent takeover I have seen in 20 years. The room erupted in chaos. The lead negotiator, Gerald Whitman, turned pale as a ghost. Shareholders shouted. Lawyers scrambled. Accusations flew across the table. But Dr. Blake dismantled the fraud point by point, clause by clause, until there was no doubt left. And in that moment, Elena set down her tray, standing not as a server, but as the woman who had just saved billions of dollars and exposed the truth that all the experts had missed. Gerald Whitman's voice cracked with desperation. "This is absurd! She's just a waitress!" But Dominic Hale rose slowly, looked at Elena with newfound respect, and extended his hand. His voice carried across the silent room. "Not just a waitress. The only person here who saw the truth." Gasps filled the air. Some sneered, some looked ashamed, but no one could deny what had happened. Later that night, when the ballroom had emptied, when the fraudulent negotiators had been escorted away, and the shareholders were still reeling, Dominic approached Elena quietly. His voice had none of the arrogance it carried hours before. "You saved me tonight," he admitted. "Tell me, what's your story?" Elena hesitated, the weight of her years of struggle pressing against her chest, then answered softly, "I'm just a mother, trying to protect her son. My father taught me never to ignore the fine print." Dominic studied her for a long moment before nodding. "The world underestimated you, Elena, but I won't." And as she walked out into the cold Manhattan night, the city lights glowing against the winter sky, she whispered to herself the words she had always wanted to say. "Dad, I did it. I proved them wrong."